"That's your seat, Margaret." She pointed at a folding chair, metal cold, tucked behind the catering table, like something they'd forgotten to put away. Not a question, not an apology. 4 words delivered with a smile that could cut glass. I looked at my son. My only son. The boy I raised alone, worked 2 jobs for, sold my jewelry to send to college. He looked at his shoes. Didn't say a word. And in that single, breathless silence, I understood exactly what I had become to them, not the groom's mother. Just a problem they'd found a quiet place to park. But what none of them knew was who was about to sit down right beside me. If you're new here, subscribe and follow my story all the way to the end. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I am not a dramatic woman. I never have been. I raised my son by myself in a small house in Ohio, and I learned early that the only way to survive was to keep your chin up and your mouth shut when it counted. I cooked, I cleaned, I worked, I prayed. I did not make scenes. I did not demand attention. I simply loved quietly and completely the way mothers do when they have nothing left to give but themselves. So when I tell you what happened at Ethan's wedding, I need you to believe me when I say it was not something I could have imagined, not even in a nightmare. It started 3 weeks before the wedding. Claire, that's Ethan's wife, the woman he had been dating for 2 years before he proposed, called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I was in the middle of ironing a blouse when my phone buzzed on the counter and I saw her name and felt something I couldn't quite name, not dread exactly. More like the feeling you get when a cloud passes over the sun on an otherwise perfect day. "Margaret," she said. No hi, no how are you, just my name, like a formality she had to get through. "I wanted to talk to you about the seating arrangements." "Of course," I said. "What did you have in mind?" There was a pause, the kind of pause that is not about finding the right words, the kind of pause that is about deciding how much to pretend. "We're doing a very intimate ceremony," she said. "Close family on the groom's side, close family on the bride's side. Ethan's father will be seated in the front row with his wife and the kids." I put down the iron. Ethan's father. That would be Richard. The man who had left us when Ethan was 4 years old. The man who had shown up again when Ethan was 22, remarried with 2 stepchildren and a beach house in Florida. And Ethan Sweet, desperate to be loved Ethan, had opened the door wide and let him back in without a single condition. I had said nothing then either, because that's what mothers do. "I see," I said carefully, "and where will I be sitting?" Another pause. "We've set aside a wonderful area near the reception perimeter. You'll still have a full view of the ceremony, and you'll be right near the catering team, so you won't have to wait long for anything." I stood there with the phone pressed against my ear, and I thought very calmly that I had misheard her. That the words catering team and perimeter were not words a woman used to describe where she was placing her soon-to-be mother-in-law at her son's wedding. "Claire," I said slowly, "are you telling me I'll be seated near the service area? It's really lovely back there," she said briskly. "Lots of greenery, very relaxed." "Relaxed," I repeated. "Ethan thinks it's the best arrangement for everyone." And there it was. The sentence that landed like a stone dropped into still water. Not Claire's decision, Ethan's. My son had agreed to this. I think I said something polite. I think I said, "Thank you for letting me know," or something equally meaningless. And then I hung up the phone, and I sat down on the kitchen floor, not dramatically, not in tears. I just sat down because my legs needed a moment. That's all. Ethan called me that same evening. I could tell from his voice that he already knew. I knew. It had that quality strained slightly too casual, the way his voice used to sound when he was 12 and had broken something in the house and was waiting for me to bring it up first. "Mom, hey, you talked to Claire?" I did. "The seating arrangement, look, it's complicated. Claire's family is very large and there are a lot of dynamics we're trying to navigate, and honestly the spot near the garden is actually one of the nicer—" "Ethan," I said his name quietly, not angrily, just clearly. He stopped. "You know what that seat means," I said. "You know it." Silence. "It's just one day, Mom. Can you just let this one go?" And I want you to sit with that for a moment. Can you just let this one go? As if there had been a long list of things I had refused to let go. As if I had been collecting grievances like trading cards, hoarding them in some secret drawer, waiting for the right moment to throw them all on the table. I had let everything go. For years. For decades. I had let Richard go. I had let my own grief go. I had swallowed more hurt than any person should have to swallow, and I had done it quietly with a smile on my face and dinner on the table. "All right," I said. "I'll be there." "Thank you, Mom. Really." "Of course," I said. "I'm your mother." I hung up, and I sat in the dark for a long time. I did not tell anyone what had happened. I have a sister, Donna, who would have driven from Pittsburgh with fire in her eyes and a prepared speech, and I didn't want that. I have a few friends who would have offered the kind of sympathy that requires you to perform your own pain back at them, and I didn't have the energy for that either. So I kept it to myself. I went to the department store, and I bought the nicest dress I could afford, a deep navy blue with small pearl buttons along the sleeve, and I told myself that I would walk into that wedding with my head high, and I would sit wherever they told me to sit, and I would not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me break. That was the plan. The plan did not survive contact with the wedding day. I arrived at the venue, a renovated estate, about 40 minutes outside of the city. And the woman at the entrance, a young girl in all black with a clipboard, found my name and pointed me toward a side path rather than the main entrance where guests were being seated. I followed without saying a word. I watched couples and families filing into the main area, taking programs from ushers in matching bow ties, finding seats in the gilded rows that had been arranged near the altar. And then I saw my chair. It was a folding chair. Not even one of the standard rental chairs they'd provided for all the other guests with their padded white cushions and little silk ribbons tied to the backs. A folding chair. Metal. With a thin cushion that someone had placed on top as if that would soften the message. It was positioned behind where the photographers had set up their equipment. There was a table beside me with a half-assembled centerpiece, a bucket of stems, and a florist crouched nearby who looked up at me with apologetic eyes before looking quickly back at her work. I stood there and I looked at that chair, and I thought about the night Ethan was born. It was February. There was ice on the road, and Richard had already been gone for 3 months. I drove myself to the hospital. I held my own hand through 14 hours of labor, and I did not cry once. And when they placed that tiny, red-faced, furious boy in my arms, I made him a promise. I told him he was everything, that I would never let anything hurt him, that I would be whatever he needed me to be for the rest of my life. I sat down in the folding chair. I placed my purse on my lap. I folded my hands. I looked straight ahead at the altar, and I breathed. The guests filled in. The music started, and I was invisible. That was the design of it. I was placed close enough to claim I had been included far enough to be forgotten. I could see the back of Richard's head in the third row, right side the family section. His wife beside him in a blush gown. His stepchildren dressed like they were going to a magazine shoot. And there was not a single person near me. Not one. Just the florist and the photographers adjusting their lenses and the catering staff moving in and out through a side door and me. I want to tell you that I handled it with complete grace. I want to tell you that none of it touched me. But that would be a lie, and I've never been a liar. What I felt sitting there behind the service equipment at my only child's wedding was something I don't have a good word for. It wasn't just sadness. It wasn't just anger. It was something older and deeper, the feeling of having been erased, of having spent 30 years pouring yourself into a person only to discover that you had been edited out of the story they were telling about their own life. I gripped the clasp on my purse until my knuckles ached, and then I heard his voice. "Mind if I sit here?" I turned, and I felt the world tilt slightly on its axis, the way it does sometimes when something happens that is so unexpected, so completely outside the boundaries of what you had prepared yourself for, that your brain simply refuses to process it all at once. He was tall, silver-haired, dressed in a dark suit that fit the way suits only fit on men who've learned through long experience which things in life are actually worth spending money on. And his face, I would have known that face in a coal mine at midnight. I would have known it if 60 years had passed instead of 27. "Alex," Not Alex from my imagination. Not Alex from the photographs I had stopped letting myself look at. Not the ghost of Alex that appeared sometimes in the early hours of the morning when the house was quiet and I was less defended against memory. Real Alex, standing in front of me with that particular quiet smile, the one that had always meant he knew something you didn't quite know yet, but were about to find out. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Margaret," he said, gently, like my name was something he'd been saving. "Alex." My voice sounded strange to me, thin. He sat down in the empty chair beside mine. Where had the chair come from? Someone must have set it there, or he had brought it himself, and he settled in as if he sat beside me at events all the time, as if no time had passed, as if the 27 years between us were something we had simply agreed to step over. "You look exactly the same," he said. "I look 61 years old," I said. He laughed. Low, genuine. "Then 61 years old looks good." I stared at him. "What are you doing here? How are you even here? This is my son's wedding." "I know," he said. "I was invited." "By whom?" He paused, just slightly. "Let's say by the right person at the right time." He glanced around at the folding chairs, the florist, the bucket of stems. Then he looked back at me with something careful in his expression. Though I'm starting to think the seating arrangements here deserve some explaining. I laughed before I could stop myself. It came out half like a laugh and half like something else. "You could say that." "Tell me." And somehow in that whispered exchange between the opening processional and the arrival of the bridesmaids, I told him. Not everything, there wasn't time for everything, but enough. The phone call from Claire, the folding chair, Ethan's voice on the telephone asking me to let it go. Alex listened the way he had always listened, the way that had made me fall in love with him all those decades ago, which was to say, completely. No interruptions, no advice halfway through. Just his full, steady attention on me, like a warm light. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Let's pretend we came here together." I looked at him. "Just for today," he said. "Let them wonder." I considered that. I thought about how it would look. I thought about Ethan seeing us. I thought about Claire's face. "That might cause a scene," I said. Said Alex. And he smiled again. "Might." I turned back to the altar as the first bridesmaid appeared at the far end of the aisle, and I made a decision that I had not made in a very long time. I decided not to shrink. I decided not to fold myself into the smallest possible shape so that no one would be inconvenienced by my presence. I decided that if they wanted to put me near the service area, then the service area was going to be the most interesting seat in the house. "All right," I said quietly. Alex reached over and straightened the sleeve of my dress with a light touch. "You always did look remarkable in navy blue," he said. I felt something loosen in my chest, something I hadn't even realized I'd been holding. Across the aisle through the rows of guests, Ethan was emerging from a side room with his groomsmen, and I watched the exact moment his eyes swept the crowd and landed on us. The small smile he'd been wearing, the performative calm of a groom, showing everyone he was in control, faltered. His eyes moved from my face to Alex's, then back to mine. He had never seen this man before in his life. But he could see from the way Alex sat beside me, from the way our heads had been inclined toward one another, from the entirely ordinary intimacy of our posture, that whoever this man was, he was not a stranger to his mother. Ethan's face did not go pale yet. That would come later. But something shifted in his eyes, something uncertain, something that looked for just a flash like the beginning of a question he wasn't sure he wanted the answer to. I straightened my back. I clasped my hands in my lap. I looked at my son standing at the altar of his wedding, and I thought very clearly and without bitterness, "You should have given me a real chair." The music swelled, the doors opened, and Claire appeared at the end of the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than my first car. The guests rose. I rose with them, and Alex stood beside me. Claire walked down that aisle like she owned every molecule of air in the room, and I will give her this. The woman knew how to make an entrance. The guests exhaled in that collective, involuntary way that happens when something visually overwhelming walks into a space. Flowers, silk, the kind of composure that takes years of practice and a particular breed of coldness to maintain under pressure. I watched her. I watched Ethan's face when he saw her, and even through everything, through the folding chair, through the phone call, through all of it, I felt the small, stubborn bloom of a mother's love. When I saw my son's eyes fill up, he loved her. Whatever else was true, he loved her. And I held on to that the way you hold on to something fragile in the middle of a storm. Alex leaned slightly toward me. "You're doing that thing," he murmured. "What thing?" "The thing where you talk yourself out of being angry because you don't want to take anything away from him." I didn't answer, partly because the ceremony was beginning and it wasn't the moment, but mostly because he was right, and being known that precisely that, quickly after 27 years, was a sensation I hadn't braced for. The officiant began to speak, something about love and commitment and the courage it takes to choose a person. I heard the words the way you hear music from another room present, but at a remove. My attention kept drifting. To the back of Richard's head in the third row, to the way his wife leaned against his shoulder, like they had been built to fit that way. To the stepchildren scrolling their phones until someone nudged them. To Ethan, who had glanced our direction twice already in the first 5 minutes of the ceremony. The second time he looked, I held his gaze. He looked away first. Something about that small thing, just him looking away, cracked something open in me that I had been keeping sealed for a long time. Because it wasn't the seating. Not really. The seating was just the most recent, most visible expression of something that had been building for 2 years since Claire had come into the picture, and Ethan had slowly, methodically begun the process of rewriting the story of his own childhood. Suddenly I was difficult. Suddenly I was too emotional. Suddenly every holiday became a negotiation. Every phone call got shorter, every visit got pushed back a month, then 2 months, then, "Oh, Mom, we're just so busy." I had watched myself disappear from my own son's life one small degree at a time, and I had let it happen. Because that is what I had been trained to do. Make yourself smaller. Don't be a burden. Don't be the kind of mother-in-law they complain about. Just be grateful for whatever they give you. A folding chair behind the flower arrangements. Be grateful. "She's watching you," Alex said very quietly. Not a warning, just information. I turned my attention slightly, and without moving my head, I found Claire at the altar, and he was right beneath the practiced serenity of her expression. Her eyes were fixed on us with an attention she was trying very hard to disguise as nothing. She looked away the moment she noticed me notice. Good, I thought. Wonder. The vows began. Ethan's voice was steady, clear, the voice of a man who had rehearsed. Claire's was softer, more controlled, the careful performance of vulnerability. I listened to every word. I memorized them the way you memorize things you know you'll need to return to later. When Ethan said, "For the rest of my life," I pressed my thumbnail into my palm. Then it was over. The rings were exchanged, the kiss was brief and elegant, and the guests erupted, and Ethan and Claire turned and walked back down the aisle as husband and wife. And as they passed our row, my folding chair, Alex's borrowed one, the florist packing her tools quietly beside us, Ethan's eyes found me again. This time, he did not look away quickly. This time he looked for a full 3 seconds, his gaze moving between my face and Alex's, and I saw it happen, the color draining slowly from his cheeks. Not dramatically, not like a movie, just that subtle shift. That quiet pallor of a man who has just realized that the world does not stop moving simply because he stopped paying attention to it. His wife tugged his arm gently. He moved on. I exhaled. "There it is," Alex said softly. "Yes," I said. "There it is." The cocktail hour was held in an adjacent space, and this was where the seating cruelty became something almost impressive in its thoroughness. Because while the ceremony had been public, had been witnessed, the cocktail hour was where the social architecture of the event became fully visible. There were clusters of people, family and friends, arranged in the organic way of people who know each other well, who share history and inside references and the comfortable shorthand of belonging. And I was not in any of them. I had known going in that Claire's family would not embrace me. That was fine. I had not expected to be embraced. But what I had not fully anticipated was just how completely even Ethan's side had been reorganized. His college friends, the ones I had housed for weekends and cooked for and driven to the airport at 5 in the morning, they were clustered around Richard, who had become in the last 4 years the fun, accessible, unburdened father, the one without history, the one who showed up now that all the hard work was done. Nobody came over to me. One of Ethan's friends from college, James, a young man I had met no fewer than 8 times over 4 years, walked past me, made eye contact, and then did a quick, barely perceptible recalibration and changed course. Couldn't place me, or didn't want to. I wasn't sure which was worse. And then Alex touched my elbow lightly. "Come with me," he said. I let him guide me toward the center of the room, and this small act of physical direction, this deliberate movement toward the center rather than the edges, changed everything. Because Alex moved through a room the way certain people do, with a quiet authority that has nothing to do with volume or performance. People noticed him. People noticed the way he noticed me. And suddenly, I was not the forgotten woman by the service entrance. I was the woman with the man that nobody could quite identify, and human beings are wired to pay attention to what they cannot immediately categorize. I saw it happen in real time. A woman from Claire's side, her aunt, I thought, or perhaps her godmother, a brisk woman in a yellow dress who I'd been briefly introduced to at the engagement party, and who had not remembered my name, then drifted close. "I'm sorry I don't think we've met properly," she said to Alex, with the particular brightness of a woman who has decided she wants to know something. "I'm Patricia, Claire's aunt." "Alex," he said, and shook her hand warmly but without elaboration. Patricia waited. He didn't continue. "And how do you know the family?" she tried. "I know Margaret," he said simply. And he looked at me in a way that made Patricia look at me, and the look on her face shifted, recalibrated. I watched her mentally rearrange what she thought she knew about the seating arrangement and the woman who had been placed beside the flowers. "Of course," she said. "How lovely." She drifted away, and I pressed my lips together to keep from smiling. "You enjoyed that," I said. "I have absolutely no idea what you're referring to," said Alex. We found 2 actual chairs, proper ones, cushioned near the edge of the gathering, and I let myself relax for the first time in hours. And in that loosening, something I had been holding very tightly behind my sternum began to speak. "How long have you been in Ohio?" I asked. "About 8 months," he said. 8 months. I turned that over. "And you just happened to be invited to my son's wedding." He was quiet for a moment, the comfortable kind of quiet, not the evasive kind. "I've been looking for you for a while, Margaret." The words landed somewhere behind my ribs. "That's a large thing to say," I told him. "It's a true thing." I looked at my hands, at the pearl buttons on my sleeve, at the room around us, the laughter and the clinking glass, and the beautiful oblivious celebration of 2 people beginning their life together, while beside me, the beginning of a very different, very old conversation was quietly opening its eyes. "You left," I said. Not accusatory, just factual. "There was a misunderstanding," he said. "One I should have fought harder to correct. I know that. I knew it then." He paused. "Your mother told me you had moved on, that you'd said you didn't want to hear from me." I went very still. "My mother," I said. "She called me. About a month after everything. She was very kind about it, but she was clear. My mother had been dead for 11 years, and she had taken this apparently with her. I didn't know how to feel. I was too old and had lived through too many complicated loves to give way to simple anger. What I felt was something more like the particular exhaustion of discovering that even the past is not finished with you. "She was protecting me," I said finally, "in her way." "I know," said Alex. "I understood that even then. He stopped. "I just never stopped wondering." I looked at him, the silver at his temples, the way the years had settled into his face, not harshly but honestly, the way time treats people who have lived in it fully rather than fought against it. 27 years, I said. 27 years, he agreed. And then from across the room a voice cut through the ambient sound of the cocktail hour like a knife through silk. "Mom." I turned. Ethan was walking toward us. His jaw was set in that particular way that meant he was trying to appear calm and not entirely succeeding. 2 steps behind him at a slight angle that suggested she had pushed him in this direction while maintaining the ability to claim she hadn't was Claire. Ethan stopped in front of us. He looked at Alex with an expression I recognized. It was the expression of a man who has been confidently wrong about something and is only now finding out. "Mom," he said again, slightly differently. Less statement, more appeal. I just want to, who is this?" "This is Alex," I said. "Alex." He repeated it like a word in a foreign language. "An old friend," I said. From behind, Ethan Clare's eyes moved between the two of us with a precision that had nothing friendly in it. She was calculating. I could see her doing it, running the variables, assessing the information she did not have, trying to determine how this changed whatever equilibrium she believed she had constructed. "I didn't know you were bringing a guest," Ethan said, and there was something in his voice, a slight edge, a small accusation, that made Alex glance at me with one eyebrow just barely raised. "You didn't ask," I said pleasantly. "Mom." "Ethan." I said his name the same way I had said it on the phone, clearly, quietly, not as a reprimand, as a fact. "This is your wedding day. I would like to enjoy it. I hope you'll let me do that." He opened his mouth, closed it. Claire stepped slightly forward. "Of course," she said, smooth as glass. "We're so glad you could make it, Alex." She smiled at him. The smile she gave to people she was filing away for later. "Congratulations," Alex said to them both. His tone was warm, genuine, and utterly unreadable in all the ways that mattered. "You've done a beautiful job with all of this." Claire blinked. "Thank you." "Your mother must be so proud," he added to her specifically. And I watched something flicker in Claire's face just for a fraction of a second. The smoothness cracked, and underneath it was something startled and young and not quite as armored as she wanted everyone to believe. Then it was gone, sealed back up. "She is," said Claire. "Thank you." Ethan looked at me. His face was doing something complicated, guilt and confusion, and something else, something younger, something that reminded me for a painful instant of the 12-year-old with the broken thing waiting to be found out. "We should get back," he said. "Dinner seating's opening in a few minutes." "Of course," I said. "We'll find our way." They walked back into the crowd together, and I watched them go, and I noticed, because I am a mother, and I noticed these things, that Ethan did not take Claire's hand. He walked beside her, close, but not touching, and the distance between their hands in that moment told me more than anything that had been said. "He's not happy," Alex said quietly. "No," I agreed. "He's not." "She runs the house." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. Alex nodded slowly, the kind of nod that means I understand more than I'm going to say right now. Dinner seating, as it turned out, had me at a table near the back with a collection of people I had never met, a colleague of Claire's father, an elderly cousin from out of state who was hard of hearing and confused about whose wedding this was, and a couple who had arrived late and seemed unsure they were at the correct event. Alex had somehow been assigned no seat at all, which under ordinary circumstances would have been an awkward problem. Instead, he simply moved a chair from an adjacent table that had a vacant spot, placed it beside mine, and sat down. Nobody said a word. I looked at him. "What?" he said. "You do that very calmly," I said. "I've found that if you move with enough purpose," he said, "people assume you know exactly what you're allowed to do." I thought about that, about how much of my life I had moved without that assumption. How much space I had not taken because I had been waiting for someone to give me permission. My son's wedding, my single folding chair, my folded-up presents behind the flower arrangements, quiet and grateful and invisible. Not anymore. The speeches began after dinner. Richard stood up, first, of course he did, and delivered a speech about Ethan that was warm and funny and full of stories that were not his to tell because he had not been there for them. He talked about Ethan's determination, Ethan's loyalty, Ethan's good heart, and the room laughed and nodded, and I sat with my hands in my lap, and I thought I taught him all of those things. I taught him to be determined when he failed his driving test twice and wanted to give up. I was the one who sat with him through the loyalty, the late nights, the quiet hospital waiting rooms, the moves across state lines. I had been every single word of that speech. Richard sat down to applause. Nobody asked me to speak. I had not expected them to. But sitting there hearing the room warm to Richard's version of my son's story, I felt something settle in me with the particular weight of a decision that has finally stopped being a question. I was done being erased. I picked up my glass. Alex noticed. He picked up his. "To you," he said quietly. "To reclaiming the seat," I said. We touched glasses, and across the room, over the heads of the guests, over the flower arrangements, and the catering staff, and the beautiful, terrible architecture of that day, Ethan watched us. And this time, the color that left his face was not just surprise, it was recognition. He was beginning to understand. I think that his mother had not shown up to the margins of his wedding to disappear. She had shown up to remember who she was, and the evening was far from over. The dancing started at 8:30, and that was when everything that had been simmering beneath the surface of that evening finally began to boil. I had watched the first dance from my table, Ethan and Claire moving in slow circles to a song I didn't recognize, something modern and carefully chosen, the kind of song that says, "We are young and tasteful, and our love is a curated thing." They looked beautiful together. I will not pretend they didn't. Whatever else Claire was, she was composed, and whatever else Ethan had become, he was still in his best moments, his father's best quality, and my stubbornness fused into something that could be genuinely impressive when it wanted to be. But the second the first dance ended and the floor opened up, the evening changed its temperature. Richard made his way toward me. I saw him coming from across the room, and I had approximately 45 seconds to decide how I wanted to handle it, and I used every one of them. He was 63 now, heavier than he'd been. His hair had gone the particular shade of white that looks distinguished on men who haven't earned it. He was smiling that wide, performative smile that I had once loved and had later understood was his primary tool for moving through the world without consequences. "Margaret," he held out both hands like we were old friends, reuniting at a class reunion. "You look wonderful." "Richard," I said. He glanced at Alex with the particular attention of a man who is measuring something and trying not to appear to be measuring it. Alex looked back at him with the pleasant, unhurried expression of someone who has absolutely nothing to prove. "I don't think we've met," Richard said, extending a hand. "Alex," said Alex. He shook it. Brief, firm. "Richard, I'm Ethan's father." "I know who you are," said Alex. The smile on Richard's face held, but something behind his eyes did a quick, small recalibration. He turned back to me. "Beautiful wedding, isn't it? Claire's family really went all out." "They did," I agreed. "Ethan seems happy." He said it with the satisfied tone of a man claiming credit for a crop he didn't plant. "He does," I said. An awkward pause settled between us. Richard filled it the way he always had, with noise. "You know, I've been meaning to call you. It's been too long, Margaret. We should all have dinner sometime, the whole family." "The whole family," I repeated. "Absolutely. You meet Diane, my wife, you haven't met her properly. Ethan and Claire, maybe make a real occasion of it." He was warming to the idea as he spoke it the way people do when they're more in love with the performance of generosity than with the act itself. I looked at him steadily. "Richard," I said, "you were given the third row. I was given a folding chair behind the photographers." The smile didn't fall, but it froze, just slightly, just enough. "I'm sure that was just a logistics thing," he said. "I'm sure it was," I said pleasantly, and I turned back to Alex, and I picked up my glass, and the conversation was over. I heard Richard say, "Nice to meet you," to Alex, and drift away, and Alex made a quiet sound that was not quite a laugh. "That was surgical," he said. 29 years of practice," I said. But even as I said it, I was watching something unfold on the other side of the room that pulled my attention completely. Ethan was standing with Claire near the edge of the dance floor, And they were talking, or rather Claire was talking, and Ethan was doing that particular kind of listening that isn't really listening. The kind where a person's face has gone very still and their eyes have acquired a fixed, slightly distant quality that means they are not processing words, they are surviving them. Claire's hand was on his arm, but it was not an affectionate touch. It was the touch of a hand that is used to being the anchor in a particular dynamic. I watched my son nod, once, twice. Then he looked up and our eyes met across the room, and in the half-second before he looked away, I saw something I had not seen on his face in a very long time. He looked exhausted. Not tired the way a groom is tired on his wedding day. Exhausted the way a person is exhausted when they have been carrying something very heavy for so long that they've forgotten what it felt like to put it down. My heart did something complicated. Alex followed my gaze. He said nothing, but he reached over and placed his hand briefly over mine on the table, and the warmth of it was enough. It was Donna who arrived at our table at 9:15 and nearly made me choke on my water. My sister, who I had specifically not told about this, who lived in Pittsburgh, who as far as I had known that morning believed she had not been invited to this wedding and had made her peace with it over a phone call with me 2 weeks prior, in which she had said with great restraint, "I'm sure they had their reasons," in a tone that communicated she believed no such thing. She came through the side entrance in a green dress with her reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the expression of a woman who has been briefed and is ready. "Don't look at me like that," she said, pulling out the chair across from me and sitting down without invitation. "I was invited last minute. Apparently one of Claire's cousins couldn't make it, and they needed someone to fill a seat." "You were a seat filler," I said. "I am a very well-dressed seat filler," she said. Then she looked at Alex. She looked at him the way my sister has always looked at things she wasn't expecting, with wide, bright, slightly dangerous eyes. "Well," she said. "Donna," I said. "This is Alex." The pause that followed was exactly 1 beat too long. "Alex," said Donna. Her voice had gone very careful and very controlled, which for Donna is essentially the equivalent of anyone else screaming. "The Alex." "I imagine so," said Alex. Donna looked at me. "Margaret Louise." "Please don't," I said. "I'm not doing anything," she said. "I am sitting here, peacefully, being a seat filler." She picked up a glass of water, took a long sip, set it down. 27 years, she said to no one in particular. "Donna." "I'm just remarking on the passage of time. It's a perfectly neutral observation." Alex, to his credit, looked genuinely amused. "It's good to see you, Donna." "Is it?" she said. But she was almost smiling, the kind of almost smile that means forgiveness is being considered not yet granted. "You look well." "So do you." "I've had a hard decade. Flattery is accepted." She put her glass down and leaned across the table toward me, lowering her voice. "How bad was it, the seating? I heard from Cousin Patricia, who heard from the florist." "The florist," I said. "Word travels Margaret. Was it the folding chair?" "Tell me it wasn't the folding chair." I said nothing. "Mother of God," said Donna, "keep your voice down." "I am keeping my voice down. This is me with my voice down. You should hear what it sounds like when it's up." She sat back. Her jaw was tight. "And Ethan allowed this." "Ethan is navigating something complicated," I said, and I surprised myself by meaning it, by feeling the truth of it even now, even tonight, because I had seen his face when he watched Claire talk at him near the dance floor. And I was angry. I was genuinely, deeply angry, but I was also a mother, and those two things were both true at the same time. "Navigating," Donna repeated with the tone of someone who finds the word insufficient. "Leave it, Donna." She looked at me, then at Alex, then back at me. Something in her expression shifted, softened just slightly in the way of someone who is reading a situation more fully than they first had. "You seem," she paused, "different." "Different how?" "Like yourself," she said simply. "You seem like yourself. You haven't seemed like yourself in about 2 years." I had nothing to say to that because it was true and we both knew it. Then the moment cracked wide open because Ethan was walking toward our table, and he was not wearing the performative calm of earlier. His bow tie was slightly loose. His expression was unguarded in a way that told me Claire was not watching, or if she was, he had temporarily stopped caring. He stopped at the edge of the table. He looked at Donna, a flash of surprise quickly swallowed. Then he looked at Alex. Then he looked at me. "Mom," he said, "can I talk to you just for a minute? Just us." I looked at Alex, who gave the smallest nod. I looked at Donna, who pressed her lips together in a way that said, "I will stay here, and I will behave, but I want a full report." I stood up and followed my son to a quieter corner, away from the music, away from the crowd. And when we stopped, he turned, and for a moment he just looked at me, and I let him look, and the silence between us had the particular quality of a silence that has things living inside it. "Who is he?" Ethan said, not aggressively, almost quietly, with something vulnerable at the bottom of it. "Someone who was important to me before you were born," I said. "He absorbed that. How important?" "Ethan." "Mom, please, just how important?" I looked at my son, at this man who had been 4 pounds 14 ounces in my arms 31 years ago, who had called me Mama until he was 6 and then abruptly switched to Mom like it was a contract renegotiation, who had cried for 3 days when the family dog died and refused to admit it, who I had fought for, worked for, sacrificed for, and who had put me in a folding chair behind the flowers at his wedding. "He was the one I thought I would spend my life with," I said, "before things went wrong in the way they sometimes do when you're young and there's no one wise enough around you to help you fix them." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't know about him. There's a lot you don't know about who I was before I was your mother," I said, not unkindly, just as a fact. He looked down at his shoes, the same gesture from the phone call, the same gesture from when he was 12. "The seat," he said. "Mom, I know how it looked. Claire had all of these. There were seating dynamics with her family that I can't even fully explain, and she was really stressed, and I told myself you would understand." "I do understand," I said. He looked up. "I understand exactly what happened," I said. "I understand that when it came down to a choice between what Claire wanted and what I deserved, you chose what Claire wanted. I understand that you have been making that choice consistently for about 2 years. I'm not saying it to punish you. I'm saying it because I think you need to hear it said plainly without anyone managing the language of it." His face was doing that complicated thing again, guilt and recognition and something that looked at its raw edges like relief. The relief of someone who has been waiting to have a true thing said to them. "I'm sorry, Mom." His voice cracked on the last word. "Just slightly. Just enough." "I know you are. I should have put you in the front. I should have." "Yes," I said. "You should have. Are you okay? We're your parents, Ethan," I said. "Both of us. But only one of us was there." I held his gaze and I said the next part carefully, because I meant it as love, not as wound. "I want you to be happy. I genuinely want that. But I need you to understand that being your mother does not mean I am required to be invisible." He nodded. His jaw was working. He was holding something back. "And I need you to look at your marriage honestly," I said, quieter now. "Not tonight, not in the middle of your wedding, but soon. I need you to ask yourself honestly whether the person you've become in the last 2 years is who you want to be." He said nothing, but the nod he gave me was the slowest, most effortful nod I had ever seen from him. The kind that means, yes, I already know this, and it costs something to admit it. "Go back to your wife," I said. "It's your wedding. Be present for it." He looked at me for one more moment. Then he did something he had not done in a long time. He hugged me. Not a quick, socially obligatory hug, a real one. Brief but real. His hand on the back of my shoulder, his chin ducked slightly. I let myself hold it for exactly as long as it was given. Then he pulled back, straightened his bow tie, and walked back into the crowd. I stood there alone for a moment, and I breathed. When I returned to the table, Donna was leaning across toward Alex with the focused energy of someone conducting a quiet but thorough interview. Alex appeared to be answering her questions with the equanimity of a man who has decided that Donna is worth being honest with. And the letters," Donna was saying. "She never received them." "Not one," said Alex. Donna leaned back. She looked at me as I sat down with the particular expression of a woman recalibrating 2 decades of assumptions. "Your mother," she said. "I know," I said. "She told me she was protecting you." I looked at Donna sharply. "She told you?" "About 6 months before she died. She said she'd made a decision years ago that she wasn't sure anymore was the right one. She didn't give me details. I didn't push." Donna's voice had gone quieter. "Careful. I should have pushed." The 3 of us sat with that for a moment, the particular weight of things that were said too late and too little, and with too much protection wrapped around them. Then, from the dance floor, the DJ shifted the music to something older, something from a different era, and the tempo of the room changed, and I felt Alex look at me. "I believe this is ours," he said. "I don't dance," I said immediately. "You absolutely do," said Donna. "Donna, Margaret, this man spent 27 years looking for you. The least you can do is one dance." She picked up her water glass with the finality of someone who considers the matter settled. I looked at Alex. He stood and extended his hand with the patience of someone who already knew how this was going to go. And I thought about the folding chair. I thought about Ethan's face. I thought about my mother and the letters that never arrived, and the 27 years that had passed in the space between a misunderstanding and a truth finally told. I took his hand. We walked to the edge of the dance floor, and when he turned and I turned with him, I became aware, in a way I hadn't quite been all evening, of how close we were standing, of the weight of time between us, of the extraordinary, improbable strangeness of this day that had begun as the worst of my life and had become something I did not yet have words for. We began to move, and that was when Claire found us. She appeared at the edge of my vision, not approaching, just present, watching from a few feet away, with that precise, controlled attention she had been applying to me all evening. Her champagne glass was in her hand, and her expression was unreadable, except for the eyes, and the eyes were not unreadable at all. They were calculating, yes, but underneath the calculation was something else, something I had seen once tonight already when Alex had mentioned her mother's pride, that brief fracture in the surface, that flash of something young and uncertain. She was watching us dance, not with hostility, with something harder to name. I kept moving. I did not look away from her. And after a long moment, Claire looked down into her champagne glass, and I saw her shoulders drop just fractionally, just barely, and the set of her jaw change from armor to something closer to the truth. She turned and walked away into the crowd. "What just happened?" Alex murmured. "I'm not entirely sure," I said. "But I think it might be the beginning of something honest." He pulled back slightly to look at my face. Whatever he saw there, he seemed to understand it. He nodded once, and we kept dancing, and around us the wedding moved on oblivious, and I felt for the first time in longer than I could track like a woman who had not been erased, a woman who was fully, irrevocably, unapologetically present. Whatever came next, they would have to deal with me, all of them, because I was done disappearing. The song ended and Alex and I stepped off the dance floor, and the first thing I noticed was that Donna was gone from the table. Her chair was pushed back at an angle that suggested a rapid departure, and her water glass had a fresh lipstick mark on it, which meant she had been there very recently. I looked around and spotted her near the far side of the room, standing very still, talking to someone I didn't immediately recognize. A woman, medium height, dark hair, pulled back in a dress that was expensive, but not showy. They were speaking quietly, and Donna's posture had that careful, deliberate quality she only gets when she is trying very hard not to react to something. "Your sister looks like she knows something," said Alex. "My sister always looks like she knows something," I said, "usually because she does." We made our way back to the table, and I poured myself a glass of water and drank half of it before I realized my hands were not quite steady. The dancing had done something to me, not the physical act of it, but the visibility, the choice to be visible. It takes more out of you than invisibility does in the short term. Invisibility is exhausting in the slow grinding way of a long illness. Visibility is exhausting in the sharp, immediate way of a fever. It burns, but at least you know the body is fighting. Alex sat beside me and said nothing for a moment, which I appreciated. He had always understood the value of silence at the right time. Then Donna came back. She sat down across from us and placed both palms flat on the table and looked at me with an expression I had not seen on her face in many years. It was the expression she'd had when she had to tell me our father was in the hospital. The expression of a woman carrying something she wishes she didn't have to hand to you. "The woman I was just talking to," she said. "Her name is Sandra. She's the sister of Claire's former business partner." I waited. "Apparently," Donna said carefully, "Claire's family is not as uniformly delighted about this wedding as the seating chart and the flower budget would suggest." Alex set down his glass. "Go on." Donna glanced at him, then back at me. "Sandra says that Claire's father, Gerald, the one who gave the second speech and cried on cue, has been trying to get a meeting with Alex for the better part of 6 months." She paused. "He apparently didn't know that Alex was going to be here tonight, and Sandra says he's been asking questions about him since the cocktail hour." I turned to look at Alex. He was quiet for a beat that was almost imperceptible. "Claire's father is in commercial real estate," he said. "You know him. I know of him. We've never met directly." Another brief pause. "He put together a development deal about 8 months ago that required a particular kind of backing. The backing fell through. There's been a search for alternative financing since then." Donna looked at me. I looked at Alex. "How large a deal?" I asked. He named a number that made Donna put down her glass. "And you're the alternative financing," I said slowly. "I was approached," he said, "through intermediaries. I hadn't made any decisions." He looked at me with that particular steadiness. "I didn't come here tonight because of Gerald Margaret. I want you to understand that clearly." "I do," I said, and I did. But the information was rearranging things in my mind, connecting points I hadn't known were related. The wedding, the guest list, the last-minute seat-filler invitation that had reached Donna, the way Claire's eyes had moved over Alex from the beginning with something more pointed than ordinary social curiosity. "Did Claire know who you were?" I asked him. "When she saw you with me, did she know—" He considered this honestly. "It's possible she knew my name. Whether she connected the name to my face when she saw me with you, I can't say with certainty, but her father would have known." Which meant that at some point during this wedding, this carefully orchestrated, meticulously controlled event, Gerald had seen Alex sitting beside the woman his daughter had placed in a folding chair behind the flowers, and something in the math of that evening had gone badly wrong for someone. I sat with that. Then I said quietly, "So Claire may have insulted the one person her father has been trying to court for 6 months." Donna made a sound that was not entirely kind. "If there is a God," she said, "he has a sense of humor." I didn't laugh. Because even in the middle of this, even with the dark satisfaction of an irony that large, I was thinking about my son. About Ethan, in the center of all of this. About whether he knew. About whether any of this had been explained to him, or whether he had simply been given instructions and learned not to ask for the reasoning behind them. "I need to understand something," I said to Alex. "And I need you to be completely honest with me." "Always," he said. "Did you come tonight because you knew Gerald would be here because of the business?" He looked at me steadily. "I came because I found out 3 weeks ago that the woman I had been looking for was the mother of the groom at an event I had been invited to by a mutual contact in the industry. I came because I was not going to let another coincidence pass without acting on it." He paused. "The Gerald situation is a complication I was aware of. It is not the reason I'm here." I held his gaze. 27 years of not knowing where he was. 27 years of a misunderstanding my mother had built a wall around. And now this strange, overloaded evening where the personal and the professional and the past had all arrived at the same table and were waiting for me to sort them out. "All right," I said. "All right," said Donna. "All right, I believe him." I looked at her. Don't look at me like that. I know the difference between a man who's performing honesty and a man who's being honest. I've had enough experience with the former. She pressed her lips together, not disagreeing, just reserving judgment the way she reserves it, like money in an account she's not quite ready to spend. It was 20 minutes later that Gerald found us. He was a tall man, well-built, with the particular kind of confidence that comes from decades of getting what he wanted in rooms where he was the biggest checkbook. His smile was wide and practiced, and he moved through the space between tables with the ease of a man used to navigating crowds he owned. He stopped at our table with his hand already extended toward Alex. I apologize for not introducing myself sooner. Gerald Harmon, father of the bride. A beat. And you must be Alex Mercer. Alex stood and shook his hand. I am. Congratulations on your daughter's wedding. Beautiful day, Gerald said. He was performing warmth, but his eyes were doing something different, assessing, measuring, recalibrating. He turned to me with the slightly adjusted smile of a man remembering to be polite to the furniture. Margaret, lovely to see you again. Again, I said pleasantly, because we had met exactly once briefly at an engagement dinner 4 months ago, and he had not remembered my name without prompting even then. Great occasion, he said, already turning back to Alex. I have to say I wasn't expecting the pleasure. When I heard you were here, I thought, what are the odds? He laughed, the laugh of a man who does not believe in odds. Small world, said Alex. Smaller every year. Gerald put a hand on the back of an empty chair. Mind if I... Actually, said Alex in the same pleasant, unhurried tone he had used all evening. I think we were just about to step outside for some air. Could we schedule time this week? I'll have my assistant reach out. Gerald's hand stayed on the chair back for a second too long. 1 second. Then he smiled again, fuller, this time the smile of a man recalibrating with practiced ease. Of course, no rush. Enjoy the evening. He looked at me once more, and this time the look was different. It had information in it. He was reading me differently now, not as the spare, difficult mother-in-law shunted to the margins, but as a variable he had miscalculated. He walked away, and I watched him go directly toward the table where Claire was standing with a group of her friends, and I watched him lean in and say something low and quiet, and I watched Claire's posture change. It was subtle, the shift of a shoulder, the slight turn of her head, but I had been watching Claire all evening, and I knew the difference between her social posture and her private posture. She looked up, found me across the room, held my gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she excused herself from her friends and walked toward us, and I straightened in my chair and breathed. She stopped at our table. Alex had sat back down. Donna became very interested in the centerpiece. Claire looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face yet, not the smooth management, not the cold smile. Something stripped back, something closer to the actual person underneath all the orchestration. Margaret, she said, could we talk? I looked up at her. Of course. She glanced at Alex and Donna with a delicacy that was in its way the most genuine thing she had done all evening. Just the two of us. There's a sitting area off the hallway. I stood. Donna caught my eye. I gave her a small nod that meant, I'm fine. And let's see what this is and don't follow me. Claire walked and I walked beside her, and we moved out of the main room into a quieter hallway where the music became muffled and the voices of the crowd receded, and when she stopped and turned to face me, she looked for the first time all evening her actual age, which was 34, which was young, which I had been trying to remember all night and kept forgetting in the face of how formidably she presented herself. I owe you an apology, she said. No preamble. Direct, which I respected even in that moment. All right, I said. The seating arrangement was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I did it, and I told myself it was about logistics and family dynamics, and it wasn't. It was about... She stopped, pressed her lips together, started again. I was threatened by you. I know that sounds... It doesn't sound anything, I said. Keep going. She looked at me with something almost like surprise, as if she had expected me to soften the moment for her to say, oh no, don't be silly, I understand. I was done softening things. Ethan talks about you, she said. Not in a, it's not the way people talk about someone they have a normal, healthy relationship with. It's the way people talk about something they've built their whole interior life around. You're not just his mother to him, you're the standard for everything. And I walked into that, and I felt like I could never... She stopped again. I felt like I was always going to come second. I looked at this woman, this young woman who had orchestrated the worst day of my recent life, and was now standing in a hallway at her own wedding telling me the true reason with more honesty than I had expected from her. "Claire," I said carefully, "loving your mother is not the same thing as leaving no room for your wife. I know that intellectually." "It has to be more than intellectual," she nodded. Her eyes were bright. Not crying, she was not a woman who would allow herself to cry in a hallway at her own wedding, but bright with the particular pressure of something held very firmly in check. "The thing about Ethan," I said, and I chose every word, "is that he loves with everything he has. He gets that from me. It's not a flaw, Claire. It is the best thing about him, and if you've spent the last 2 years trying to redirect that love rather than be the beneficiary of it, then you've been working against yourself." She was quiet for a long moment. "My mother and I don't..." She stopped, tried again. "We're not close. My mother is not..." She closed her eyes briefly, opened them. "She's not someone who makes you feel like you're the standard for everything. She makes you feel like you're an ongoing project that isn't quite complete." And there it was. The thing underneath the thing, the real architecture of all of it. I had a choice in that moment. I could stay exactly where I was, in the perfect righteous position of the woman who had been wronged and was now being apologized to. I could accept the apology with measured grace and keep my distance, which I had earned, and nobody could argue otherwise. Or I could be the thing Ethan had said I was to him, the standard. "My mother made me feel invisible," I said. "For different reasons than yours makes you feel incomplete. But I know what it is to spend your whole life trying to be seen by the person who should have made you feel seen without you having to try." Claire looked at me, really looked, for the first time all day. "It changes you," I said. "If you let it, it makes you defensive in ways that hurt people who don't deserve it. I know that from experience." I paused. "You put me in a folding chair, Claire, on my son's wedding day, and you did it because you were afraid of me. I want you to really sit with how much damage that kind of fear can do if you don't face it directly." She swallowed. "I accept your apology," I said. "But I need you to understand that accepting it is not the same as telling you it was a small thing. It wasn't, and more importantly, Ethan saw you do it, and he said nothing. And that is the conversation you two actually need to have, not with me, with each other." She nodded, slowly, twice. "He's not happy," I said, quietly, not cruelly, the way you say a true thing when you love the people on both sides of it. "And neither are you. And this is day one." Her chin moved, almost imperceptibly, the way people move when something hits a place they've been protecting. "You can build something real," I said, "or you can keep managing the architecture of how it looks. You're smart enough to do either one. I'm hoping you're wise enough to choose the first." We stood in the hallway for a moment longer. The music from the main room pulsed softly through the wall. Then Claire did something I had not predicted. She reached out and touched my arm briefly, lightly, the way you touch something you're not sure yet you're allowed to touch, and she said, "I'm sorry, Margaret, for all of it." "I know," I said. She straightened, took a breath, and I watched her put herself back together the way she does efficiently with tremendous control, and when she turned to walk back toward her wedding, she was composed again, armored again, but the armor fit differently than it had an hour ago. Something underneath it had shifted. I stood in the hallway alone for a moment. Then I heard footsteps, and I turned, and it was Ethan. Standing at the end of the hallway. He had seen us. I realized seen us come in here together. Seen Claire walk back out. He was looking at me with an expression that was open in a way his face hadn't been all evening. "What did you say to her?" he asked. "The truth," I said. "Same thing I said to you. He leaned against the wall. That gesture, that particular loose-limbed lean that meant he was dropping the performance, was so precisely the gesture of his 16-year-old self that my chest ached with it. "I've made a mess of things, haven't I?" he said, not a question. "You've made some choices that need rethinking," I said. "That's different from a mess. Messes can't be fixed. Choices can be remade." He looked at his hands. "Alex Mercer," he said. "I looked him up during the dinner, on my phone." He glanced up at me. "Mom, I know who he is." "You really loved him." I looked at my son. "Yes," I said simply. "I really did. And he came here for you." "He says so." Ethan was quiet. Then, "Are you happy, like right now tonight, underneath all of this? Are you—" The question was so naked, so completely unstrategic, so purely his. My son asking after his mother, the way he used to ask when he was small and sensed something was wrong and didn't have the words for it yet, that I had to breathe for a moment before I could answer. "I'm something better than happy," I said finally. "I'm awake." He looked at me for a long time. And then quietly, with the weight of a man who has spent 2 years sleepwalking through his own choices and is just now becoming aware of it, he said, "Me too, I think, for the first time in a while." And in that hallway, away from the music and the speeches, and the beautiful, terrible performance of other people's expectations, something between us that had been pulled very tight for 2 years went very quietly slack. Not fixed, not finished, but beginning at last to breathe. Ethan and I walked back into the reception together, and I noticed the exact moment people registered it, the small collective recalibration of a room that has been watching a situation all evening and has just received new information. We were not performing reconciliation. We were simply walking side by side the way a mother and son walk when they have said true things to each other and are still standing. But in a room that had spent hours reading the subtext of every movement, it was enough. Donna saw us first. She was back at the table, and she looked at our faces, and her whole body exhaled. She didn't say anything. She just reached over and poured me a fresh glass and pushed it toward the edge of the table as I sat down. Alex was watching me with that quiet, reading attention of his. "All right," he said. "Better than all right," I said. He nodded once, and the simplicity of that response, no fanfare, no excessive relief, just acknowledgement, was the thing I had forgotten about him. He had never needed me to perform my own emotions for his comfort. He had always just let me feel them at whatever volume they arrived. Ethan squeezed my shoulder once, and then went back to his wife, and I watched him cross the room toward Claire, and I watched the moment he reached her, the way he touched the small of her back, the way she turned toward him, the way they looked at each other for a beat that had something different in it than the careful, managed exchanges I had been observing all evening. Something cracked open, just slightly. Something real. I turned away. That part was theirs. "Your sister," said Alex, "has spent the last 10 minutes interrogating the catering staff about who arranged the seating chart." I looked at Donna. She looked back at me with perfect composure. "I'm being friendly," she said. "I like to know people." Donna. "The woman who did the seating is named Priscilla," Donna said. "She works for the event coordinator that Claire hired, and apparently the seating instructions came directly from Claire in writing 4 days ago. Specific, detailed. Your name was listed with a note that said, 'Flexible placement.'" She paused to let that land. "Flexible placement, Margaret. That's what they called it." I sat with that phrase, flexible placement, the bureaucratic language of erasure, as if I were a potted plant they weren't sure where to put. "Does it change anything?" Alex asked me, genuinely asking, not leading. "It confirms what I already knew," I said, "which means no, it doesn't change anything. It just makes the picture sharper." Donna leaned forward. "What it means is that there is a paper trail, if you ever needed one." "For what purpose, Donna?" She sat back. "I don't know yet. I'm filing it away." I almost smiled. My sister has been filing things away since she was 9 years old. She has a mental cabinet somewhere that is meticulously organized and occasionally terrifying. The evening was winding toward its final hour. The cake had been cut. The bouquet had been thrown by a Claire, who managed to make even that look choreographed. The older guests were gathering their things, and the younger ones were getting louder in the way of people who have decided that what remains of the night belongs to them. I should have been tired. I had been running on adrenaline and old grief and something new that I didn't have a clean name for, and by any reasonable measure, I should have been reaching for my coat. But I wasn't tired. I was as I had told Ethan awake, more awake than I had been in 2 years. The way you feel after a long fever finally breaks, and you sit up in bed and discover that the world is still there unchanged waiting. It was Gerald who broke the fragile equilibrium of the final hour, and he did it in a way that was so precisely, specifically Gerald that I almost had to admire the consistency of it. He came back to our table just before 10 o'clock. This time, he didn't ask for a chair. He stood at the edge of the table and he looked at Alex with the expression of a man who has made a decision and is now executing it regardless of whether the timing is appropriate. "I'll be direct," he said. "I understand you've been considering the Harmon development proposal." Alex looked at him, calm, unbothered. "This isn't the place for this conversation, Gerald. I agree, and I apologize for that, but I'd like to understand, is there anything that would affect your consideration? Anything we could address that might change the picture?" The table went quiet. Donna had gone very still. I kept my expression neutral, but I was watching Gerald with the focused attention of someone who has just seen a tell in a poker hand. Because what Gerald was actually asking, dressed up in the careful language of business, was this: "Does the fact that my daughter put your companion in a folding chair by the catering table affect whether you will give us several $1,000,000? And if so, what does it cost to fix it?" Alex was quiet for a moment, the kind of moment that expands. Then he said, "The proposal has merit on its own terms, or it doesn't. My personal relationships don't enter into it." He paused. "However, I'll tell you what does enter into it. Character. The character of the people I do business with. How they treat the people around them when they think it doesn't count." He looked at Gerald steadily. "I've been watching that this evening. I'll be in touch." Gerald held his gaze for a beat, then nodded. "Of course. Thank you for your time." He looked at me once briefly correctly, with something that fell just short of an apology, and walked away. Donna picked up her glass. "I want to be you when I grow up," she said to Alex. "You're terrifying enough as you are," he said. She laughed, a real one, the kind she reserves for people she has decided she actually likes. And in that laugh, I felt something loosen further in my chest, some last remaining tightness, because Donna does not laugh like that for people she doesn't trust, and her trust, once given, is one of the most reliable things in the world. But it was what happened next that I was not prepared for, not even slightly. Claire found me one more time before the night ended, not in a quiet hallway, not with careful privacy. She found me at the table in front of Alex and Donna, in front of the ambient audience of a thinning reception, and she sat down across from me and she placed something on the table between us. It was an envelope. I looked at it, then at her. "This was in my father's files," she said. Her voice was controlled, but her hands were not quite still. "I found it 3 months ago. I didn't know what to do with it. I still don't entirely. But after tonight, I think you need to have it." I looked at the envelope. It was old. The paper had the particular yellowing of something that has been in a drawer for decades. My name was on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize at first. Then I did recognize it. Of course I did. My mother's handwriting. My hands were very still as I picked it up. "My father did business with a man named Harmon 20 years ago," Claire said quietly. "Different Harmon, my uncle, my father's brother. There was a property transaction. Your mother was involved through a real estate connection, apparently." She paused. "I don't know the full details. I found this in a box of old correspondence. It's sealed. I don't know what's in it." She looked at me with something direct and undecorated. "But it has your name on it, and it belongs to you." The table was completely silent. I held the envelope. I could feel the weight of something inside, not just paper, something small and solid. Alex reached over and placed his hand over mine, not pressing, just present. "Are you all right?" Donna said quietly. Yes, I said. And I was. I was absolutely all right. I was the still point at the center of something enormous, and I had learned tonight that still points do not break. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded twice, and inside the fold, a key. Small old, the kind that opens a lockbox or a safety deposit drawer. I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was my mother's. The date at the top was 22 years ago. I read it slowly. I will not repeat every word here because some things belong only to the people they were written for, and this was written for me. But I will tell you what it said in its substance because you have been with me through this whole long night, and you deserve the truth of it. My mother wrote that she had kept Alex's letters, all of them. She had not destroyed them, she had kept them in a lockbox, because even as she had made the decision she believed was protective, she had not been able to make herself erase him entirely. She wrote that she had been afraid. Not of Alex himself, but of what she saw when she watched me love him, the totality of it, the way I disappeared into it, the way it had made me someone she didn't know how to reach. She had been afraid of losing me to a love she couldn't control, and so she had done the thing frightened people do. She had removed the variable. She wrote that she knew by the time she wrote this letter that she had been wrong. That protection without permission is just another kind of control. That she had spent years watching me be alone and telling herself it was the right outcome, and had finally in the quiet of her own reckoning stopped being able to convince herself. She wrote, I could not give you back the years, but I saved the letters. They are in the box. This key opens at the First Federal Branch on Clement Street, drawer number 44. They are yours. They always were. And at the bottom, in the slightly looser handwriting of a woman who had been fighting her own pride with every sentence, I love you, Margaret. I'm sorry I loved you badly sometimes. I hope you find him again. I hope it's not too late. I folded the letter. I was not crying. I was something beyond crying in that place where emotion becomes too large for tears and simply occupies you, instead fills every room of you, sits down without asking. Donna had her hand over her mouth. Alex was very still beside me. I looked at him. She kept them, I said. I know, he said. His voice was not quite steady. 22 years. I know. Claire was watching us with wide eyes, the composure finally entirely gone, and she looked in that moment exactly like what she was, a young woman who had stumbled into the middle of something much larger and older than she had understood, and who was beginning to grasp the weight of what she had unknowingly been carrying in that file box for 3 months. I didn't know what it was, she said. I just knew your name was on it. I looked at her. Thank you, I said, for giving it to me. She nodded. Her throat moved. Claire. I waited until she was looking directly at me. This is your wedding night. Go be with your husband. She stood. She straightened. And she did something that surprised me completely. She leaned down and briefly lightly pressed her cheek against mine in the way women do when words are insufficient. It lasted 1 second. Then she walked away. Donna let out a long, slow breath. Well, she said, I have been to a lot of weddings in my life. Donna, I said, I'm just saying. Alex picked up the key from the table where I had set it. He turned it in his fingers, set it back down in front of me. Whenever you're ready, he said. Monday, I said. I'll go Monday. He nodded. Will you come with me? He looked at me. Margaret, try to stop me. The reception ended at 11. The lights came up in the way lights come up at the end of events, slightly too bright, slightly too honest, stripping away the romantic softness and leaving everything in its actual state. The guests gathered coats and exchanged embraces and made the promises people make at weddings that they sometimes keep and sometimes don't. Ethan found me near the coat check. Claire was a few feet behind him talking to her mother with a posture that had something new in it, less performance, more presence. I noticed her mother touch her arm in the way of a woman who is also trying, who is also imperfect at it, and I thought about what Claire had said. An ongoing project that isn't quite complete. I thought about how many of us had been made to feel that way by the people who loved us badly through no particular malice, just through the particular human failure of fear. Mom, Ethan said, He held my coat for me the way he used to when he was 12 and had decided that chivalry was something he wanted to practice. I put it on. "Your father is looking for you," I said. "He wants a photograph." He made a face. "He wants a photograph with his kids for his Instagram." "I know," I said. "Go take the photograph, Ethan." "Mom, he is your father. He is imperfect, and he was absent, and you love him anyway, and that is allowed. Go take the photograph." He looked at me. Something in his face shifted. "How do you do that?" he said. "Do what by? Just let things be what they are, without making them wrong." I thought about that. About all the years I had spent making myself smaller so that things would be easier for everyone around me. About the folding chair, about the letter in my purse, about the key. "I'm learning," I said. "I'm still learning." He hugged me the real kind again, the second real one of the evening, and this time I let myself hold on for one full breath before I let go. Alex was waiting by the door. Donna was beside him wearing her coat and holding mine, which she had retrieved from somewhere with the quiet efficiency she applies to things she has decided need doing. The three of us walked out together into the night air, which was cold and clean and full of the kind of quiet that only exists after a long, loud thing has finished. I stopped walking for a moment, just to feel it. "You okay?" Donna asked. "I'm okay," I said. She hooked her arm through mine. Alex fell into step on my other side, and the three of us walked across the parking lot toward Donna's car, because she had driven and she was, as always, the practical one, and I felt in the space between those two people who had been in my life the longest, a completeness that had nothing to do with resolution. Life is not resolved. It doesn't wrap up cleanly. There are still conversations to be had, a lockbox to open a relationship with my son, to rebuild a daughter-in-law, to learn how to reach. There is a man beside me whose 27 lost years I will spend the rest of whatever we have understanding one true thing at a time. But what I carried out of that wedding, past the folding chair and the flower arrangements and the flexible placement, and all of it was this: I had not disappeared. I had been put in a corner, and I had refused quietly and completely to become the corner. My mother had loved me badly and then tried to correct it. My son had failed me and then tried to face it. Claire had wronged me and then tried to return what belonged to me. None of them were finished. Neither was I. But the woman who had gripped her purse clasped behind the photographers and told herself to be grateful for whatever they gave her, she had walked out of that venue, and she was not coming back. Some things once reclaimed cannot be taken again. I had spent 61 years learning my own worth. I intended to spend the rest of my life spending it.